Welcome to The Deep Dive, the show where we really try to unpack the most important insights from, well, a whole stack of sources, giving you a crucial shortcut to being truly well-informed.
That's the goal.
And today, we're plunging into a skill that's just absolutely vital for the world we live in now, this rapidly changing world, the power of rethinking. And we're starting with a story that's, wow, it's as dramatic as it is heartbreaking, really shows how high the stakes can be when we, fail to unlearn.
Yeah, it's a powerful one.
So imagine this. It's a scorching hot August afternoon, 1949, deep in Man Gulch, Montana. 15 elite smoke jumpers. These are, wildland firefighters known for being incredibly daring. They've just parachuted into a forest fire started by lightning.
Right, standard procedure for them. Get in quick.
Exactly. Their mission seems clear. Dig a fire line, contain the blaze. But in just minutes, everything goes sideways. Their strategy, their training, their lives, all thrown into just terrifying chaos.
The fire just exploded, didn't it?
It leaped across the gulch, charging straight at them. And these aren't small flames. We're talking 30 feet high, moving at this unbelievable speed, covering the length of 2 football fields in less than a minute.
Unimaginable. Just walls of flame coming at you.
It's a literal race for survival against an absolute inferno.
And right there, in that peak moment of danger, their foreman, a guy named Wagner Dodge, he gives an order that just went against everything they knew, everything they were trained for.
Totally counterintuitive.
He told them, drop all your tools, your shovels, your axes, the heavy stuff, everything they'd been drilled to carry and care for. I mean, these tools were part of their identity.
Right. Some men, apparently, they physically had to have their shovels pried from their hands. Their minds were just locked in.
Yeah. And then Dodge did something even wilder. He lights a fire right in front of them, an escape fire.
Creating a safe zone, burning the fuel the main fire needed.
Exactly. Burned out area behind it where the main fire would just pass over. It was, well, a radical act of unlearning in the moment.
The outcome, though, it was just stark. Out of 15 men, only 3 survived.
And Dodge was one of them.
Dodge was one. He alone had that mental flexibility, to ditch his training, rethink his whole approach when faced with something completely unprecedented.
Such a harsh lesson.
And look, while most of us, hopefully, aren't battling 30-foot walls of fire in our daily lives,
Hopefully not.
the challenge of rethinking, of questioning our ingrained assumptions, it's surprisingly common, isn't it? Even if the stakes seem lower.
Absolutely. It's the squeaky brakes you keep ignoring on your car.
Or assuming the stock market will just keep climbing, despite, all the warning signs.
Right. Or even in relationships, assuming everything's fine when deep down you feel that distance growing. We just cling to what we know or what we think we know.
Often until it's way too late.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really our mission for this deep dive. We want to explore the power of knowing what you don't know. We're pulling key insights from some amazing sources, but especially Adam Grant's really profound work in Think Again.
It's a fantastic book for this.
Yeah. And this isn't just, abstract theory. We think this is a crucial shortcut to being genuinely well-informed in a world that, frankly, never stops spinning.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. And that context you mentioned, the accelerating pace of change, the information explosion, it just makes this skill absolutely critical. I mean, think about this statistic. It's pretty striking.
Okay.
In 1950, medical knowledge, roughly, it doubled about every 50 years. Okay, 50?
Right. Seems reasonable for back then.
Yeah, but by 1980, it was doubling every 7 years. And by 2010, just 3.5 years.
Wow. 3.5 years for all medical knowledge to double.
Exactly. That relentless acceleration is what rethinking isn't just nice to have. It's essential for survival, intellectually speaking. In a world like that, we have to question our beliefs constantly.
So it's like we need to spend as much time rethinking as we do thinking in the first place. Precisely. We need to embrace that discomfort of doubt rather than just sinking into the cozy comfort of conviction, which can be, well, often really misleading.
That state of change, doubling every 3.5 years, that really does frame why this isn't just a minor skill. Okay, so if we accept that rethinking is vital, where do we start? It feels like it has to begin internally, right? With ourselves.
Yeah, that's the first battleground, updating our own views.
It is fascinating, though, isn't it? Like, we're so quick to update our phones, renovate the kitchen, get new clothes.
Oh, yeah, refresh everything.
But when it comes to our knowledge, our opinions, we hold on to them so tightly. Sometimes, like, like mental fossils, way past their expiry date. Psychologists actually have a term for this, right?
They do. It's called seizing and freezing.
Seizing and freezing, okay.
We tend to grab onto a viewpoint, often the first one that makes sense or feels comfortable, and then we freeze it in place. We prioritize the comfort of conviction over the discomfort of doubt. Our beliefs get brittle long before our bones do.
And this ties into something you mentioned, this sort of first instinct idea.
Yeah, the first instinct fallacy. It's that common belief, which turns out to be mostly wrong, that your initial gut reaction or your first answer on a test is usually the best one.
Right. Trust your gut.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But study after study, especially looking at exams, shows the opposite. When students actually change their answers, they're far more likely, often twice as likely, to switch from a wrong answer to the right one than the other way around.
So changing your mind is usually a good bet on a test.
Well, the key insight isn't just about getting the answer right. It's the benefit of considering the change, engaging in that deeper thinking, that moment of doubt. That's where the value lies.
Okay.
But here's the really telling part. Even when students were explicitly taught about this fallacy, shown the data, told, hey, rethinking helps, in subsequent tests, they were no more likely to revise their answers.
Seriously, even knowing it's probably better to reconsider.
Yeah. It just highlights how incredibly deep-seated this resistance to rethinking actually is. It feels wrong somehow to second-guess ourselves.
It's like our default setting is protect existing beliefs. But Adam Grant suggests we can sort of switch modes, right? He talks about these 4 mindsets we often fall into.
He does. And they're pretty recognizable when you hear them. There's the preacher mode.
Okay, the preacher.
Yeah, who's basically convinced of their own righteousness, delivering their beliefs like gospel, trying to protect and promote their sacred ideas.
Got it. Then there's the prosecutor.
Right. The prosecutor's goal is to win their case. They're laser-focused on finding flaws in other people's arguments, proving them wrong.
Okay. Preacher, prosecutor, and the politician.
The politician. They're seeking approval, trying to win over an audience. They might shift their views, tell people what they want to hear, lobby for support.
Preacher, prosecutor, politician. Feels like we see those a lot.
We do. But Grant contrasts these with a 4th mode, one that's often much more effective for learning and adapting, the scientist mode.
Scientist mode. Okay, what defines that?
Fundamentally, a scientist is searching for truth. They don't start with answers, they start with questions. They form hypotheses, they design experiments to test those hypotheses, and then they discover knowledge based on the evidence. They're willing, even eager, to be proven wrong, because that means they've learned something.
And this isn't just for, actual scientists in labs.
Not at all. That's the key point. This scientific approach, this mindset, can inform our everyday decisions, our work, our relationships, even how we think about big societal issues. It's about favoring humility over pride, curiosity over conviction.
Okay, so how does this play out in the real world? Is there evidence this scientist mode actually works better?
There is. A really fascinating experiment was done with over 100 founders of Italian startups. Most were pre-revenue, just starting out.
Okay, entrepreneurs.
Exactly. They were split into 2 groups. Both got the exact same standard entrepreneurship training. But one group, the scientific thinking group, got an extra layer.
What was the extra layer?
They were explicitly encouraged to treat their entire business strategy as a theory. Customer interviews weren't just chats, they were hypothesis development. Building a minimum viable product wasn't just about getting something out there. It was an experiment to test specific assumptions. Their job was to measure results rigorously and pivot based on data, not just gut feeling.
So one group got standard advice, the other got standard advice, plus think like a scientist about your businesses.
You got it, and the results were, pretty staggering.
How staggering.
Over the next year, the control group, the ones with just standard training, averaged less than $300 in revenue.
$300.
Okay, not great for a startup year.
Not great. The scientific thinking group. They averaged over $12,000 in revenue.
$12,000 compared to $300.
Yeah. They were bringing in revenue more than twice as fast, getting customers sooner. It was a massive difference, driven purely by that shift in mindset.
Wow. So why? What was the scientific group doing differently? It really came down to rethinking. The control group tended to get stuck. They stayed wedded to their original strategies, their initial product ideas. They were acting like preachers for their idea, or prosecutors against feedback, or politicians trying to sell their original vision.
Stuck in those first 3 modes.
Exactly. The scientific thinkers, though, When their experiments, their MVPs, their customer interviews showed their initial hypotheses were wrong, they didn't double down. They pivoted. They changed their approach. They did this more than twice as often as the control group.
So they weren't afraid to say, okay, that didn't work, let's try something else based on what we learned.
Precisely. That agile rethinking, driven by that empirical scientific approach, was the absolute key to their success. It shows the real-world power of escaping those rigid preacher-prosecutor-politician mindsets.
That's incredibly compelling. But it also highlights a huge barrier, doesn't it? This tendency to get stuck, which connects to what's sometimes called the curse of knowledge, leading to overconfidence, blind spots.
Absolutely. The very expertise that brings success can sometimes blind us to new threats or opportunities.
Like the BlackBerry story. It's almost a business school case study now.
It really is. Michael Lazaridis, the co-founder, he was brilliant, an electronics wizard. BlackBerry was hugely successful.
They owned the market for a while.
They did. But that very success bred overconfidence. As early as 1997, engineers suggested adding an internet browser. Lazaridis dismissed it. He was convinced people wanted a work device, mainly for email, not a full computer in their pocket.
Stuck on his initial successful idea.
And even a decade later, when the iPhone was emerging, he was still arguing that a powerful browser would just drain the battery too much. He was operating in, well, maybe politician mode, focusing on his existing keyboard-loving users.
While ignoring the billions of potential touchscreen users.
Exactly. He failed to really test alternative hypotheses, to think like a scientist about where the market might go. And we all know how that ended for BlackBerry. It was a catastrophic failure to rethink.
And this ties into that psychological effect, the Dunning-Kruger effect, right?
Perfectly. The Dunning-Kruger effect basically says that it's often when we lack competence in a specific area that we're most likely to be brimming with overconfidence. We don't know enough to know how much we don't know.
Right. The less you know, the more you think you know.
In the original studies, the people who scored lowest on tests of things like logical reasoning, grammar, even humor, consistently overestimated their performance. They thought they did better than about 62% of their peers, when in reality, they only outperformed 12%.
It's the classic armchair quarterback phenomenon.
That's the perfect analogy. The person yelling at the TV, absolutely convinced they know better than the professional coach, despite, having zero actual experience.
And this blindness, this Dunning-Kruger effect, it can have really serious consequences in the real world, can't it?
Devastatingly so. Take the example of Davy Oddsson, who was Iceland's central bank governor during the 2008 financial crisis.
Okay, I remember Iceland was hit hard.
Very hard. Now, Oddsson's background, it wasn't in finance or economics. It was in radio comedy, playwriting, law, journalism.
No finance background for the head of the central bank during a global financial crisis.
None. And yet he was incredibly dismissive of experts. He actually disbanded the National Economic Institute. He seemed utterly blind to his own weaknesses, his lack of relevant expertise.
Wow.
It got so bad that Parliament eventually had to pass a specific law requiring a master's degree for the central bank governor post, essentially forcing him out. As one journalist put it, his downfall was his arrogance, his absolute conviction that he knew what was best. He was at the peak of, well, Mount Stupid.
Mount Stupid. That's quite a metaphor. Explain that.
It illustrates the Dunning-Kruger effect visually. When you start learning something, you go from knowing nothing, novice, to knowing a little bit, amateur. But often that little bit of knowledge gives you a huge, disproportionate boost in confidence. You climb really fast up the slope of Mount Stupid.
You think you know way more than you do.
Exactly. You've got just enough information to feel competent, but not enough to realize all the complexities and nuances you're missing. You haven't made it over the peak and down into the valley of despair before climbing the long, slow slope of enlightenment towards true expertise. That's why they say a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing.
And you even see this in places like hospitals.
Yeah, there's some worrying data suggesting patient mortality rates can spike slightly in July. Why July? That's often when new medical residents start. They have some knowledge, but they might overestimate their skills, leading to errors. It's not just the lack of skill, it's the overconfidence coupled with it.
Okay, so overconfidence, Mount Stupid, that's one danger. But what's the flip side? Is there an opposite problem?
There absolutely is. It's imposter syndrome.
Right. Where you feel like a fraud even when you're actually competent.
Exactly. Your competence actually exceeds your confidence. You have the skills, you have the ability, but you have this nagging feeling you don't deserve your success, that you'll be found out.
Like Hala Tómasdóttir, you mentioned her, running for president in Iceland.
Yeah, a great example. Just a month and a half before the election, she's polling at only 1% support. She admitted feeling like a total imposter. Yet her message resonated. She gained incredible momentum and ended up in the final four. It suggests maybe there are some hidden benefits to that kind of doubt.
So is the goal not to eliminate doubt entirely?
I think the sweet spot, the ideal balance, is what Grant calls confident humility.
Confident humility. Okay, break that down.
It's having faith in your capability to achieve goals, your ability to learn and adapt. That's the confidence part. But it's coupled with an awareness that you don't have all the answers, that your current knowledge or solution might be flawed or incomplete. That's the humility part.
So confidence in your ability to learn, but humility about your current knowledge.
Precisely. That mindset gives you enough doubt to constantly re-examine what you think you know, but also enough confidence to actively seek out new insights and pursue better solutions.
And you're saying there are actual measurable benefits to leaning into that humility, even feeling like an imposter sometimes.
Surprisingly, yes. Studies looking at medical students getting ready for clinical rotations found something fascinating. Those who scored higher on measures of imposter syndrome, who felt those doubts, they didn't perform any worse on diagnostic tests.
Okay, so it didn't hurt their core medical skills.
Right. But they showed significantly better bedside manner. Patients rated them as more empathetic, more respectful, more professional. They were better at asking questions, listening, and sharing information.
Why would feeling like an imposter make you better with patients?
Because that doubt, that feeling of maybe I don't know everything, it makes you more curious, more open. It takes you off a pedestal. You listen more intently, you ask more questions, you're less likely to be arrogant or dismissive. The same thing was found with investment professionals. Those who sometimes felt like imposters actually received higher performance reviews.
Because they were more open to learning from others.
Exactly. As Hala Thomas Dottir put it, imposters rarely say, this is how we do things around here. They don't assume they have the one right way. They're constantly seeking advice, looking to learn and grow. That doubt fuels learning.
And this is actually something you can encourage.
Yeah. There was a study where students simply read a short article explaining the benefits of admitting what you don't know. Afterwards, their likelihood of seeking extra help in subjects where they felt weak jumped significantly from 65% to 85%.
Wow, just from reading about it.
And they were also more likely to explore opposing political viewpoints. It suggests that normalizing doubt and framing it as a path to learning can be really powerful. And in leadership, studies confirm it. The most effective, innovative, and productive teams, they're led by people who score high in both confidence and humility. They know their strengths, but they're acutely aware of their weaknesses, and that keeps them learning.
This idea of confident humility, it feels like it unlocks something really fundamental. Maybe even the possibility of, dare I say it, enjoying being wrong.
Oh, that sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Totally. I remember my son when he was maybe 5. He predicted our friend was having a baby girl, and it turned out to be a boy. He burst into tears, not because it was a boy, but he sobbed because we were wrong. It was so painful for him. Why is being wrong so intrinsically painful for us?
It's deep-seated. Psychologists talk about the totalitarian ego.
The totalitarian ego. Sounds ominous.
It's like this internal dictator running the show inside our heads. Its main job is information control, managing the facts to protect our self-image. When a core belief gets challenged, this dictator goes into overdrive.
How does it do that?
It activates that overconfidence cycle we talked about. It shields our shaky opinions inside filter bubbles, only letting in information that confirms what we already believe. And then it seals us into echo chambers, surrounding us only with voices that validate those beliefs. It makes being wrong feel like a personal attack, an assault on our identity.
So the ego builds these defenses to avoid the pain of being wrong?
Exactly, which makes the reaction of someone like Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, so remarkable.
What did he do?
Grant tells this story where Kahneman encountered a study that completely contradicted one of his long-held assumptions. Instead of getting defensive, his eyes apparently lit up, huge grin on his face, and he just said, "That was wonderful. I was wrong."
Wonderful. He enjoyed it.
Genuinely. Because, as he explained, being wrong is the only way I feel sure I've learned anything. He lives in scientist mode. He refuses to let his beliefs become cemented into his identity. He changes his mind so readily it apparently drives his collaborators crazy because he has, in his words, no unconditional love for his own ideas.
Okay, changing your mind that fast. how do you manage that without seeming, I don't know, inconsistent or flaky? What's the mental trick?
It seems to come down to two crucial types of detachment. First, detaching your present self from your past self.
Okay, what does that mean?
Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater, put it brilliantly. He said, if you don't look back at yourself and think, wow, how stupid I was a year ago, then you must not have learned much in the last year. It's about accepting that you evolve, you learn, and the you from yesterday doesn't have to dictate the you of today or tomorrow.
Yeah.
Your past beliefs aren't chains.
Right. Allowing yourself to have grown. What's the second detachment?
This one might be even more critical. Detaching your opinions from your identity.
Okay. How's that different from detaching from the past?
Most of us tend to define ourselves by our beliefs, our ideas, our ideologies. I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, I'm a proponent of this theory. The problem is, when those opinions are challenged, it feels like you are being attacked personally. That totalitarian ego kicks right in.
So what's the alternative?
Base your identity on your core values, not your current opinions. Values like excellence or generosity, freedom, integrity, security. These are more enduring. When your identity is rooted in, say, protecting health as a doctor, you have the flexibility to update your specific medical practices based on new evidence without feeling like your core self is threatened.
Ah, okay. So the value is protect health. The opinion or practice might be prescribe drug X. If evidence shows drug Y is better, you can change the practice without abandoning the core value.
Exactly. Your values provide a stable anchor, allowing your opinions and methods to be flexible and adapt to new information.
This sounds like those super forecasters you mentioned earlier, the ones who are incredibly good at predicting future events.
Precisely. People like Jean-Pierre Bougams, a military historian, or Kajir Morel, a mechanical engineer, not necessarily statisticians by trade, but top election forecasters. They embody this detachment. They explicitly view their forecasts not as truths, but as hunches or possibilities to entertain.
So they hold their predictions lightly.
Very lightly. And they are constantly, actively seeking out new information, especially information that disconfirms their current hunch. They have what they call a terror of being wrong in the long run, which paradoxically makes them highly motivated to admit short-term mistakes quickly. As Kajirsta said, there's no benefit to me for being wrong for longer.
Embrace the short-term sting of being wrong to achieve long-term accuracy.
That's the scientist mode in action.
Then admitting you're wrong, even publicly, it doesn't always damage your reputation, does it? Sometimes the opposite.
Absolutely. Look at the British physicist Andrew Lyne. In the early 90s, massive discovery published in Nature, first evidence of a planet orbiting a neutron star. Huge deal.
I can imagine.
Months later, he finds an error, a tiny error in accounting for the Earth's orbit, but it invalidated the whole discovery. He realized he was, in his words, embarrassingly horribly wrong.
Oh, that must have been devastating personally.
You'd think, but what did he do? He went to a major astronomy conference, stood up in front of hundreds of colleagues, and publicly retracted his findings, explaining the mistake.
Wow. What was the reaction?
A sustained standing ovation, not because he was wrong, but because he had the integrity, the intellectual honesty, to admit it publicly. It showed his commitment to the scientific process above his own ego. Admitting error often enhances reputation because it signals honesty and a dedication to learning.
That's a powerful counterpoint to the fear of being wrong. But what happens when that fear wins completely? When someone becomes utterly convinced they're right and refuses any possibility of rethinking?
Oh, you can get the chilling inverse. Think about Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. His infamous manifesto, the document that ultimately led to his capture after an 18-year reign of terror.
Right, his anti-technology treatise.
If you read it, it's striking for its absolute certainty. It starts, the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. Full stop. There's, as Grant notes, little consideration of alternative views, barely a hint that he might be wrong. No nuance, no caveats, just unwavering conviction. It's a terrifying example of where extreme certainty, completely divorced from rethinking, can potentially lead.
A really dark side of conviction without humility. Okay, so we've delved pretty deep into rethinking our own minds. But practically speaking, a lot of the time we need to help others rethink, right? How do we open other people's minds?
Ah, yes, the interpersonal side. This is where it gets really tricky.
Because our default approach is often, well, kind of aggressive, isn't it? We treat disagreements like battles to be won.
Exactly. We go into persuasion mode like we're prosecuting a case or fighting a war. And what usually happens...
The other person digs in their heels, they get defensive, nobody changes their mind.
Precisely. I actually had this experience myself years ago. A former student, very bright, told me years later that in class discussions she felt I was a logic bully.
A logic bully! Ouch!
Yeah, it stung. But she was right. I was so focused on presenting overwhelming rational arguments, piling on data, basically trying to force her to see the logic, that I completely shut her down emotionally. My winning the argument made her resist the conclusion even more.
That's a really important realization. So if arguing like a prosecutor doesn't work, what does?
Well, the key is shifting the metaphor. A good debate or a negotiation, it isn't a war. It's maybe more like a dance.
A dance? How so?
Think about it. In a dance, you have a partner with different steps in mind. If you just try to force your moves on them, drag them across the floor, they'll resist, stumble, maybe stop dancing altogether. You have to work with them.
Okay, I see that. So how does that translate to conversation?
Expert negotiators,
Yeah.
unlike average ones, they rarely go on the offensive or the defensive. They don't attack the other side's position, but they also don't just concede constantly. What did they do instead?
What?
They express curiosity. They ask a lot of questions. Studies show typically at least 1 out of every 5 comments they make is a question aimed at understanding the other person's perspective. They lead not by pushing, but by inviting the other person to step forward, sharing information, exploring possibilities together.
They're not telling the other person what to think. They're asking them to think and sharing their own thoughts more openly.
Exactly. They're trying to understand the dance partner's steps before suggesting a shared rhythm.
Is there a good example of this dance approach in action?
A fantastic one is the story of Harish Natarajan, a world-class debate champion. He was put in a public debate against an 8-year-old prodigy named Debra Jo Prektit.
An 8-year-old prodigy? Wow, talk about a challenging opponent.
Right. The topic was government-subsidized preschools. Debra Jo was arguing passionately for them. Now, Harish could have just demolished her arguments with superior logic and experience.
Prosecuted the case.
Yeah, but he didn't. His strategy was brilliant. He started by finding common ground. He said something like, "I think we disagree on far less than it may seem," acknowledging they both cared about tackling poverty.
So he built a bridge first.
Exactly. Then, instead of attacking her weakest points, a straw man argument, he did the opposite. He used what's called the steel man tactic.
Steel man. Okay, what's that?
It's where you address the strongest possible version of your opponent's argument. Harish acknowledged the core truth in Debra's point. Yes, preschool is generally good for kids' development. He gave her that.
He validated her main point.
Yes. And only then did he gently raise his concerns, focusing specifically on whether government subsidies were the most effective or fair solution to achieve that shared goal. It showed respect, demonstrated openness, and allowed him to connect not just with Debra, but with the whole audience. He didn't try to win. He tried to explore the issue collaboratively.
That's incredibly skillful. Acknowledge common ground, steel man the argument. What else works?
Another key thing is argument quality over quantity. Don't just throw everything at the wall.
The kitchen sink approach doesn't work.
Often, it backfires. It's called argument dilution. Piling on weak reasons can actually dilute the impact of your strong reasons. It makes your overall case seem less convincing.
So focus on your best 1 or 2 points.
Exactly. Like Michelle Hansen did in a job application Grant mentions. She knew she had weaknesses for the role, so she proactively addressed them, but then focused intensely on her core, unique strengths. It's about highlighting the signal, not adding noise.
Okay, makes sense. And how about how you present your points? Your level of confidence matters.
It really does. And maybe not in the way you'd expect. Research on expert witnesses and also on jurors deliberating finds something interesting. The most persuasive people weren't the ones who expressed absolute 100% certainty.
Not the super confident ones.
No, nor the ones who seemed totally unsure. The most credible and persuasive were those who expressed moderate confidence.
Moderate confidence. Why?
Because it signals that confident humility we talked about earlier. It suggests you've done your homework, you have a reasoned view, but you're also aware that the issue is complex and you might not have the final word. It makes you seem more balanced, more trustworthy, and it invites a more nuanced discussion rather than shutting it down. Saying I am 80% sure is often more convincing than I'm 100% certain.
Right, because 100% certainty can sound like arrogance or blindness. Okay, so asking questions, finding common ground, steel manning, focusing on strong points, expressing moderate confidence. These are great tools.
Yeah.
But you mentioned asking questions and listening. Is there a more structured way to do that, a specific technique?
There is, and it's incredibly powerful. It's called motivational interviewing.
Motivational interviewing. Sounds like something therapists use.
It originated there, yes.
Yeah.
Developed by clinical psychologist Bill Miller back in the 80s, initially working with clients struggling with addiction. He found, like you experienced with your student, that the standard approach, preaching at them, telling them why they needed to change, prosecuting their bad habits, it just didn't work. Often it backfired.
People resist being told what to do, especially about ingrained behaviors.
Exactly. They resist feeling pressured or judged. So Miller developed this different approach, motivational interviewing. It hinges on 3 key techniques.
Okay, what are they?
First, asking open-ended questions, questions that invite reflection, not just yes-no answers. Second, engaging in reflective listening, genuinely trying to understand the other person's perspective and reflecting it back to them to ensure you've got it right. And third, affirming the person's desire and ability to change, acknowledging their autonomy and expressing confidence in them.
So it's less about telling them they're wrong and more about helping them explore their own motivations for potentially changing.
Precisely. It's about resisting what Miller called the righting reflex.
The writing reflex.
That immediate urge we all feel to jump in, fix the problem, offer the solution, tell someone why they're wrong and what they should do. Motivational interviewing is about deliberately suppressing that reflex and acting more like a guide than a director.
Can you give an example of this in action, outside of therapy maybe?
A really impactful one involves a neonatologist named Arnaud Gagneur. His nurses apparently called him the vaccine whisperer.
Vaccine whisperer. Okay, I'm intrigued.
He used motivational interviewing principles with parents who were hesitant about vaccinating their children. There's this great story about a mother, Marie-Aline, who was very reluctant to vaccinate her baby, Toby, especially with measles cases rising.
A common and difficult situation. How did Arnaud approach her?
He didn't lecture her about vaccine science. He didn't judge her fears. He didn't order her to vaccinate. Instead, he started by expressing his own fears, as a doctor, for Toby's safety if he wasn't vaccinated. He accepted her decision for that moment. Then he asked open-ended questions. What are your main concerns? What information have you found confusing? He listened carefully, acknowledged how overwhelming the conflicting information could be.
So he validated her experience.
Yes, crucially, he repeatedly affirmed her freedom to choose, saying things like he trusted her intentions as a mother wanting the best for her kids. Marie-Aline later said, "Just that sentence to me, it was worth all the gold in the world."
Wow. And what was the outcome?
Marie-Aline went home, thought about it, and came back. She had Toby vaccinated. And not just Toby, she had his older siblings vaccinated too. She was so moved by the conversation, she even asked Arnaud to speak with her sister-in-law, who was part of an anti-vax community. It apparently caused a bomb in that community.
Just from one respectful conversation.
Just from one conversation rooted in motivational interviewing. Follow-up studies actually showed a significant increase, about 9% in full vaccinations 2 years later, among parents who had just one such conversation compared to standard practice. It shows the incredible power of listening and guiding rather than pushing.
That is truly profound. It makes me think of that incredible story about Betty Bigambe, the Ugandan parliament member.
Oh, going into the jungle to meet Joseph Kony?
Yes, hiking 8 miles into the jungle to try and negotiate peace with a notorious warlord. Her insight from that experience was just stunning. She said, even the devil appreciates being listened to.
What a line. And it's backed by research, isn't it? When people feel genuinely heard, listened to by someone empathetic, non-judgmental, attentive, something shifts internally.
They become less defensive.
Exactly. Less anxious, less defensive. It actually encourages them to explore their own opinions more deeply, to see the nuances, the complexities, maybe even the inconsistencies in their own views. They feel safe enough to think aloud, to share more openly. This doesn't just work one-on-one either. Using things like listening circles and groups where people take turns speaking uninterrupted while others just listen has been shown to lead to less extreme, more complex attitudes among participants.
It's such a contrast to our usual mode of just waiting for our turn to talk or jumping in to refute.
Totally. And it connects to another subtle shift in how we approach disagreements. Often we get stuck arguing about why we're right.
Defending our position.
Like the Wright brothers, apparently they used to have these epic shouting matches about why their individual propeller designs were superior. It becomes emotional, about ego. A more productive approach sometimes is to shift from why to how.
Ask how something would work instead of why it's right.
Exactly. Studies have tested this. When you ask people to explain how a policy they support, say a flat tax or cap and trade or universal health care, would actually work in practice, step by step, It often triggers a rethinking cycle
Oh, so?
because it forces them to confront the gaps in their own understanding. They realize they don't actually know all the mechanisms, the potential consequences, the practical hurdles. It punctures what psychologists call the illusion of explanatory depth, that feeling that we understand things much better than we actually do.
So asking how exposes the limits of our knowledge, making us less extreme.
Precisely. It tends to reduce the extremity of their views, increases their humility, and makes them more curious about alternative approaches.
Can this how approach work even with deeply ingrained beliefs like prejudice?
There's an amazing story about Daryl Davis, the black musician known for befriending KKK members.
Right, the man who collected KKK robes from people he helped de-radicalize.
An incredible example of opening minds. In one encounter, he was talking to a Klansman who believed black people were inherently violent, prone to crime. Daryl challenged him. Okay, name 3 black serial killers. The Klansman couldn't.
Because there aren't many famous ones compared to white serial killers.
Right, so Daryl cleverly turned the Klansman's own logic against him. He said something like, well, you must have the serial killer gene. It must just be latent in you. The Klansman scoffed. Well, that's stupid.
And Daryl's response?
Daryl agreed. He said, you're right. What I said about you was stupid, but no more stupid than what you said about black people. That exchange, that moment of absurdity highlighting the flawed logic, it planted a seed of doubt. It didn't instantly change the Klansman's mind, but it made him curious about his own beliefs. He eventually quit the KKK and gave Daryl his hood and robe.
Wow. Daryl himself said he didn't convert anyone, but he gave them reason to think.
That's the core of it, opening the door to rethinking, often through listening and asking the right kinds of questions.
Daryl Davis's story is just. It shows how even the most entrenched views might have cracks if approached thoughtfully. This leads us to another barrier in communication, especially around complex issues. This tendency towards binary bias.
Ah, yes, the black and white thinking.
Our minds just seem to want to simplify everything into 2 opposing categories. Us versus them, right versus wrong, good versus evil. It makes complex issues seem simple, but it fuels so much division.
It really does. And the antidote to that binary bias, Grant suggests, is deliberately complexifying.
Complexifying, so making things more complicated. Doesn't sound appealing.
Maybe not at first. But it means instead of presenting an issue as just 2 sides of a coin, you intentionally showcase a wider range of perspectives. Think of it like looking through the many lenses of a prism rather than just a single window.
Showing the shades of gray, the different facets.
Exactly. Doing that naturally fosters more intellectual humility, realizing there's more to it than you thought. It seeds doubt about simplistic conclusions, and it sparks curiosity. I hadn't considered that angle.
How does this apply to something like, say, climate change? That often feels very polarized.
It's a perfect case study. In the past, someone like Al Gore often framed it as the truth versus the so-called skeptics or climate deniers. While well-intentioned, that framing inadvertently reinforces the binary bias. It sets up an us versus them dynamic.
Making it easy for people in the middle to just tune out.
Right. But if you look at the actual polling data on climate views in America, it's not just 2 camps. Researchers identify at least 6 distinct camps, ranging from the alarmed down to the dismissive. The crucial point is, well over half of Americans fall into categories that do accept climate change is happening and is human-caused, but they have varying levels of concern and urgency.
So it's a spectrum, not a switch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's vital here to distinguish between genuine skeptics, which is a healthy scientific stance, being willing to update your views based on evidence, and deniers, who are often locked in that preacher or prosecutor mode, rejecting evidence that doesn't fit their predetermined conclusions.
But the media often blurs that line, right? And gives deniers a lot of airtime.
Disproportionately so. Studies show deniers, who might represent maybe 10% of the U.S. population, get featured in media coverage significantly more often than actual climate scientists. This creates a false impression of the debate, makes people overestimate the prevalence of denial, and can actually reduce public willingness to support climate action. If it seems like half the experts disagree, why bother?
So complexifying means showing the spectrum, acknowledging uncertainty where it exists.
Precisely. Injecting nuance, caveats, contingencies. Research shows that when scientists or journalists acknowledge uncertainties like in studies on diet or aging, it doesn't undermine trust. Often, it increases credibility. It makes the source seem more thoughtful, less dogmatic. Similarly, acknowledging the complexity's diversity is good, but it isn't easy, makes arguments more believable and engaging.
Okay, so avoid the simple binary frame. What about debates where experts themselves seem polarized, like the whole emotional intelligence EQ versus IQ debate?
Another great example. You have Daniel Goleman famously arguing EQ matters more than IQ for success, and then someone like Jordan Peterson forcefully claiming there's no such thing as EQ.
Very binary. Who's right?
They're both kind of missing the point by arguing for supremacy. The more accurate and ultimately more persuasive view lies in the contingencies. When does EQ matter most?
Probably in jobs where dealing with people and emotions is essential, like sales, counseling, leadership.
Exactly. And where might it be less relevant or even potentially a distraction?
Maybe highly technical roles, mechanics, accountants, engineers, where the task is more analytical.
Right. So the nuanced answer is EQ's importance is contingent on the context. It's not always better. It's not meaningless. Understanding those contingencies makes the whole concept more useful and less like an idea cult.
Idea cult.
Yeah, groups that form around an oversimplified concept, this one thing is always good or this one thing is always bad. Think about fad diets or the belief in fixed learning styles or even over-reliance on things like the Myers-Briggs personality test. They preach their core idea and prosecute nuance. Complexifying helps us resist those cults.
That's a really useful way to think about it. Resist the idea cults. Now, part of complexifying means understanding other perspectives better. You said just imagining their view, perspective taking often fails.
Yeah, we're surprisingly bad at it. Studies show Democrats tend to underestimate how much Republicans condemn racism, while Republicans underestimate how much Democrats value patriotism. We project our own biases onto our assumptions about the other side. We're just not good mind readers.
So if perspective taking is flawed, what's the alternative?
Perspective seeking.
Seeking, not taking. Meaning.
Meaning, you don't just guess what they think, you ask them. You actually talk to people with different views to gain insight into the nuances, the reasons, the experiences behind their perspective. You act like a scientist testing a hypothesis about their beliefs, rather than just assuming your hypothesis is correct.
Talk to people. What a radical idea.
Exactly. And it also means being willing to embrace mixed feelings, both in ourselves and in others. Charged conversations are rarely about simple, single emotions.
Like the Christian Cooper incident in Central Park, the birdwatcher and the woman who called the police.
A perfect example of complex, charged emotions. The woman's later apology focused on just, "I was scared," which felt inadequate because it overlooked the complex mix of fear, anger, defensiveness, and yes, the underlying racial biases that likely fueled her actions. Acknowledging that complexity, those mixed feelings, is crucial for any real understanding or progress in such situations. Nuance isn't weakness. It's essential for navigating complexity.
Okay, this has been incredibly rich on the individual and interpersonal levels. Let's broaden the lens now to systemic rethinking. How do we build cultures that encourage this kind of thinking, starting maybe with education? And this isn't just for professional teachers, right? It's for parents, mentors, anyone guiding others.
Absolutely. The principles apply broadly. How do we teach people not just what to know, but how to question knowledge itself?
There's a great story about a history teacher, Erin McCarthy, that illustrates this.
The old textbook trick. It's brilliant.
Explain what she did.
So one day, an 8th grade student complains that the history textbook assignment she gave them is inaccurate. Now, for many teachers, that might trigger defensiveness. But Erin had intentionally assigned readings from an old history textbook from the 1940s.
Setting them up.
Exactly. The students were genuinely shocked. They'd grown up believing textbooks were, the gospel truth. Seeing the blatant inaccuracy, the omissions, the biases in this old text forced them to confront the idea that history isn't just a set of fixed facts.
It made them question the source.
And think like historians, like scientists. Whose story is being told here? Whose perspective is missing? What evidence supports this claim? It taught them critical thinking by exposing them to flawed information and prompting them to question it.
That's such a powerful lesson in intellectual humility. And it's something you could even adapt at home, right?
Totally. Grant suggests a simple, fun idea. Weekly family myth-busting discussions. Maybe at dinner. Pick a common belief or a fact someone learned.
Like Pluto not being a planet anymore.
Yeah, or did Columbus really discover America? Or did T-Rex have feathers? We even learned in our family that apparently when sloths pass gas, it comes out their mouths, not elsewhere.
Seriously. Okay, that's a myth worth busting.
Right. The point is making it a regular, fun activity. Helps kids get comfortable with the idea that knowledge changes, that beliefs can be wrong, and that it's okay, even good, to revise your understanding. Debunking becomes a normal part of learning.
But unfortunately, a lot of traditional education doesn't really foster this unlearning habit, does it? It's more about transmission of facts.
Often, yes. Lectures, for example. They can be engaging, sure, but they're still the dominant method in many places. Like, over half of North American STEM professors still lecture for 80% of their class time. But lectures alone, Grant argues, are not enough to develop students into lifelong learners. Students need regular practice at questioning, challenging, rethinking, at unlearning.
I actually ran into this wall myself in my own teaching. For years, I lectured about the importance of rethinking in my organizational behavior class, but I wasn't really seeing students do it.
The classic knowing-doing gap.
Exactly. So I decided to shake things up. I created a new assignment. Students worked in small groups to create their own mini podcasts or mini TED Talks.
Okay, active learning. What was the brief?
The specific charge was question a popular practice in management or champion an idea that goes against the grain or even challenge a principle we'd covered in class. I made it worth 20% of their final grade, explicitly rewarding rethinking instead of regurgitating.
So you incentivize questioning the status quo, including your own material.
Yep. And the results were amazing. I had this one group of really bright straight-A students, and they did a mini TED Talk, hilariously and thoughtfully criticizing the whole format of TED Talks themselves.
Meta rethinking. That's great.
It showed they were really engaging critically, not just passively absorbing. I even started leaving one class session totally blank on the syllabus.
Blank. What happened then?
I had the students pitch ideas for how to use that day, and then they voted. One year, a student named Lauren McCann had this brilliant idea. Everyone should write letters to their freshman selves.
Oh, wow. Reflecting on their own evolution.
Exactly. It prompted amazing rethinking about their choice of major, their focus on grades, their relationships. It acknowledged that interests and priorities changed. The next year, we did passion talks where students taught the class about something they were passionate about, beatboxing, architectural design, making the world safer for people with allergies. It just injected so much curiosity and energy, learning from peers.
That embraces a really key part of learning, allowing for confusion.
Confusion. We usually try to avoid confusion in teaching.
Right, the teacher's instinct is often to clear it up immediately. But psychologists find that confusion isn't necessarily bad. It can be a signal that you're grappling with something new, that your existing mental models aren't quite working. It's often a prerequisite for deeper learning. Students sometimes need time for their confusion.
Let them sit with the uncertainty a bit.
Exactly. There's an educator named Ron Berger who really champions this. He wants students to become leaders of their own learning, more like tackling a DIY project. They identify a problem, develop hypotheses, design experiments. His students have done things like test radon gas in local homes, map amphibian habitats, figure out snail food preferences, real inquiry.
Learning by doing, driven by their own questions.
A huge part of his approach is critique. He turned his classroom into a challenge network.
A challenge network.
Yeah. Regular critique sessions, sometimes quick gallery critiques where work is displayed, sometimes in-depth critiques of writing or projects. The key rules were critique the work, not the person, and be specific and kind. Frame suggestions as questions. I'd love to hear why you chose this, or have you considered trying?
Fostering that confident humility again. Okay to point out flaws, but do it constructively.
Exactly. There's this famous example of a student named Austin drawing a butterfly. Through 4 drafts, incorporating detailed feedback from his peers in these critique sessions, the drawing becomes incredibly scientifically accurate and detailed. It shows the power of iteration, feedback, and that willingness to rethink and refine based on critique.
It really is about building that culture where challenging ideas, even your own, even the teachers, is not just allowed, but actively encouraged and valued.
And that principle extends directly into the workplace, doesn't it? Building learning cultures there.
Absolutely, because as the saying goes, the absence of conflict is not harmony, it's apathy. If nobody ever disagrees or challenges anything, you're probably not learning much. And the foundation for that kind of productive conflict, that learning culture, is psychological safety.
The bedrock. Without it, rethinking stalls.
And we've seen the devastating consequences when it's missing. NASA's history provides some tragic examples.
Yeah, the Challenger disaster in 1986. Engineers knew there were problems with the O-rings in cold weather. They raised red flags.
But they were silenced or ignored.
Largely, yes. There was immense pressure to launch. Plus, NASA had a history of proving safety rules wrong by successfully launching, despite violating them in the past. This led to a dangerously shallow analysis of the actual risk. They failed to rethink their assumptions about safety margins.
And then, tragically, Columbia in 2003. A different technical issue, but a similar pattern.
A depressingly similar pattern. Foam shedding from the external tank had happened on previous missions without causing disaster. So, when it happened again on Columbia's launch, managers dismissed it as a known, acceptable risk, more of a maintenance issue for future flights rather than an immediate catastrophic threat. They focused on the next mission instead of thoroughly reevaluating the risk based on this specific incident.
Another failure to rethink assumptions based on past successes.
In both cases, the underlying problem was a culture that prioritized results, successful launches over process and safety. This fostered overconfidence when things went right, despite flawed procedures, and it punished perceived failures or delays, which naturally deterred people from speaking up or challenging the status quo, especially when the same managers controlled both the schedule and the technical waivers.
A recipe for disaster.
Right.
So, psychological safety, as defined by Amy Edmondson, who pioneered this work, it's about creating that climate where people can speak up.
Exactly. A climate of respect, trust, and openness, where people feel safe to raise concerns, ask questions, admit mistakes, or offer suggestions without fear of punishment, humiliation, or retribution.
And it's important to be clear what it isn't, right? It's not about lowering standards or just being nice all the time.
Not at all. It's not about unconditional praise or avoiding uncomfortable conversations. In fact, it enables more rigorous debate and higher standards because people feel safe to challenge ideas and point out potential problems. The challenge is that many high-pressure, performance-driven cultures, people naturally self-censor. They fear looking incompetent, they worry about challenging bosses due to power distance, or they just defer to the perceived experts.
So how do leaders actively create this psychological safety? It seems crucial.
Role modeling from the top is huge. The Gates Foundation provides a great example. They recognized that to tackle really complex global problems, they needed their teams to take risks, to try bold experiments that might fail. That requires high psychological safety.
So what did the leaders do?
One really creative thing was inspired by Jimmy Kimmel's Mean Tweets segment. They had senior leaders, including Melinda Gates herself, film a video reading aloud actual harsh, critical comments from internal employee reviews about them.
Wow, reading their own bad reviews publicly within the organization, that takes guts.
It does. Things like, "You remind me of a Muppet," or "This professor's a bitch, but she's a nice bitch."
Yeah.
Melinda Gates also candidly admitted, "I go into so many meetings where there are things I don't know." That vulnerability, that willingness to show imperfection and admit uncertainty from the very top, it broke down the veneer of perfection.
It reduced that power distance, made leaders seem more human and approachable.
Exactly. It signaled that it was okay not to know everything, okay to be critical, okay to learn. It fostered a much stronger learning orientation throughout the foundation, making employees more likely to offer both criticism and constructive ideas.
Beyond role modeling, are there structural things organizations can do, like how they evaluate performance?
Yes. Rethinking scorecards is key. We tend to judge decisions solely based on their outcomes. Good outcome, good decision. Bad outcome, bad decision.
Right. Seems logical.
But it's often flawed. A good outcome can result from a terrible process plus luck. And a bad outcome can result from a smart, well-reasoned process or experiment that just didn't pan out. Organizations need to start evaluating the quality of the decision-making process itself, not just the result.
So track how thoroughly different options were considered, how rigorously assumptions were tested.
Exactly. Was it a thoughtful gamble or a reckless one? A bad process with a good outcome is luck, Grant argues, while a good process with a bad outcome might be a smart experiment you can learn from. Shifting focus to the process encourages better thinking and learning, regardless of the immediate result.
That mindset seems crucial for fostering the kind of culture NASA needed. Did things change there after Columbia?
Significantly, under leaders like Ellen Ochoa, who became the director of Johnson Space Center. She actively fostered a learning culture, encouraging dissent and questioning. There's a powerful story from 2006. A potential censor issue arose before a shuttle launch. The consensus among managers was overwhelmingly to launch anyway.
Déjà vu.
Right. But this time, Ellen Ochoa, who was then deputy director, was the only senior leader in the room to vote no. She held her ground, explained her reasoning.
What happened?
Her single dissenting vote, backed by her position and credibility, led them to delay the launch, investigate further, and fix the issue. NASA then went on to have 19 consecutive successful shuttle missions before the program ended. Her willingness to rethink, to be the outlier even when it was unpopular, had a ripple effect. Years later, a senior leader recalled that moment and changed his own approach on a launch day because of her example.
That shows how one person fostering that culture can change the system. A culture of learning leads to fewer regrets.
Absolutely. It's about embedding rethinking into the system itself.
Okay, so we've covered individual, interpersonal, and systemic rethinking. Let's bring it right back to our personal lives now. How does this apply to rethinking our major life and career paths, escaping that kind of tunnel vision we can fall into?
The big picture rethinking. This is where it gets very personal.
I think about my cousin Ryan. From when he was a little kid, he wanted to be a neurosurgeon. It was his dream, but honestly, it was kind of the family dream too. Everyone expected it.
A lot of pressure there.
Huge pressure. He went through med school, got into a top residency, but he was burning out badly. He wasn't sure he was cut out for the intensity or if it would leave room for anything else in life, but he felt completely trapped, he told me later. I'd gone too far to change course. Even though, looking back, he admitted he probably would have chosen a different specialty, maybe something with better work-life balance, if he had allowed himself to rethink earlier.
Ryan's story is such a classic example of what psychologists call escalation of commitment.
Escalation of commitment, meaning
It's that tendency we have to double down on a failing plan or a past decision, not because of rational reasons like sunk costs, but because of psychological factors. We want to justify our past choices, protect our ego, avoid admitting we made a mistake. So we keep investing time, money, energy into something, even when evidence suggests it's not working.
like Ryan feeling he was too far gone, he was also suffering from something called identity foreclosure, wasn't he?
Exactly. Identity foreclosure is when you settle on a sense of self or a career path prematurely. You commit to an identity, I am a future neurosurgeon, without really exploring other possibilities, other potential selves. You lock yourself in too early.
It makes you question that classic question we ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Michelle Obama actually called that one of the most useless questions an adult can ask a child because it implies there's one single fixed answer. It promotes a fixed mindset about work and self from a very early age.
So what's a better way to frame it for kids?
Grant suggests encouraging kids to think about careers more as actions they enjoy rather than fixed identities. Instead of, I want to be a scientist, maybe I like doing science experiments. It keeps the focus on activities and interests, which allows for more flexibility and evolution. He talks about his own kids brainstorming a whole list of diverse passions, designing Legos, studying space, creative writing, architecture, gymnastics, photography, coaching soccer, being a fitness YouTuber rather than settling on just one job title.
I love that. Focusing on the doing keeps possibilities open. It argues against having rigid long-term career plans then.
It certainly argues against being rigidly attached to them. Maybe planning just one step ahead is sometimes wiser, keeping yourself open to unexpected opportunities or shifts in your interests.
So how do you navigate career choices if you're not following a fixed plan? Is there a framework?
Herminia Ibarra, a researcher on career transitions, suggests approaching it like a scientist.
Okay, back to scientist mode.
3 steps. First, entertain possible selves. Identify people you admire, maybe doing jobs you find intriguing, inside or outside your current field. Observe what their daily work actually looks like. Second, develop hypotheses. Think about how those different paths might align with your own interests, skills, and core values. And third, crucially, run experiments.
Experiments, like quit your job and try something totally new.
Not necessarily big bangs. Small experiments. Conduct informational interviews with people in those fields. Ask to job shadow for a day. Take on a small side project or volunteer gig related to that interest. The goal isn't just to confirm one predetermined plan. It's to expand your repertoire of possible selves, to learn what fits by trying things out.
Testing different identities before committing.
Exactly. And just like we need regular health checkups, Grant suggests scheduling periodic life checkups.
Life checkups like once or twice a year.
Yeah. A dedicated time to pause and reflect. Ask yourself questions like, when did I actually form my current aspirations? And how have I changed since then? Have I hit a learning plateau in my current role or path? Is it time to think about pivoting, learning something new? These questions are designed to activate those rethinking cycles, trigger humility, doubt, and curiosity about your own life trajectory.
And this isn't just about careers, is it? It applies to relationships too.
Absolutely. I remember a student at Grant's who was in a really fulfilling relationship, but he started questioning it because his girlfriend didn't fit the image he'd formed as a teenager of the kind of ambitious partner he thought he wanted.
He was stuck on an old definition.
Totally. But through a life checkup conversation, he had this realization. His values had evolved. He wasn't necessarily looking for ambition in a partner anymore. He was drawn to ambitious women in the past because that's who he wanted to become. He needed to own that ambition himself.
Projecting his own desires. What happened with the relationship?
He stayed with her. And interestingly, she later changed jobs, found work she was incredibly passionate about fighting educational inequity, and became very driven in her own way. His willingness to rethink his fixed idea of a partner allowed space for both of them and the relationship to grow and evolve.
That's a beautiful illustration of how rethinking our assumptions about others can allow them room to surprise us. This flexibility, this openness, it seems connected to happiness too. But there's a weird paradox there, isn't there? The more people focus on being happy, the less happy they sometimes become.
It's a strange but well-documented finding. Actively valuing happiness highly, constantly pursuing it as a goal, can actually backfire and even become a risk factor for depression.
Why would pursuing happiness make you less happy? That seems completely backward.
There are a few likely reasons. One is that constantly evaluating your life, am I happy now? How about now? Gets in the way of actually experiencing life and finding joy organically. You're too busy monitoring your emotional state.
Of overthinking it.
Yeah. Another is that we often chase peak moments of intense happiness, those highs, rather than focusing on the frequency of smaller, positive emotions, which research suggests is more crucial for overall well-being. We also tend to prioritize pleasure over purpose, fleeting enjoyment over activities that provide deeper meaning, even if they're sometimes difficult.
And maybe our individualistic view of happiness plays a role.
Quite possibly. The Western focus on happiness as a purely personal, internal achievement can be isolating. In more collectivist cultures, happiness is often seen as more intertwined with social harmony and connection.
So if directly chasing happiness backfires, what's the alternative? Where does lasting well-being come from?
Often it seems to emerge as a byproduct of pursuing other things, particularly meaning purpose and mastery. It's like that Adam Sandler skit on Saturday Night Live.
Oh yeah, which one?
Where he talks about going on vacation, thinking it will solve all his problems, but then realizes you're still going to be you on vacation. Changing your surroundings might bring a temporary boost, but lasting changes in happiness usually come from changing your actions.
Like joining a club, starting a meaningful project, learning a new skill.
Exactly. As Hemingway wrote, you can't get away from yourself by moving from one place to another. It's our actions, especially those that connect us to others or contribute to something larger than ourselves, that tend to bring sustained meaning, belonging, and yes, happiness.
It's about finding purpose in what you do, even in unexpected places.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Look at the story of Candace Walker, a hospital custodian. She could have just stuck to her job description, cleaning rooms, but she actively rethought her role.
How so? What did she do?
Beyond cleaning, she took it upon herself to console grieving families, to make patients laugh with little anecdotes, to check in on them. She even noticed a patient writhing in pain one night, realized something was seriously wrong, and rushed him down to urgent treatment herself, potentially saving his life. He called her my savior.
Wow. That's way beyond the job description.
Right. Her philosophy was, no, it's not part of my job, but it's part of me. She found profound meaning and made a huge impact by rethinking her role and acting to benefit others in ways she wasn't required to.
That connects to that idea of progressing through phases in our careers or lives.
Yeah, Grant describes a common three-phase progression regarding our sense of importance and contribution. Phase 1, I'm not important, feeling like a small cog. Phase 2, I'm important, focusing on your own achievements, recognition, status. But phase 3 is, I want to contribute to something important, shifting the focus beyond the self to making a difference, contributing to a larger purpose.
And the argument is, the sooner you get to phase 3,
the more impact you tend to have, and, ironically, the more fulfillment and happiness you often experience along the way. It echoes John Stuart Mill's observation from centuries ago. Those who are happy, quote, have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness. Aiming thus at something else, they find happiness, by the way.
Happiness is a byproduct, not the goal itself.
Exactly. And all of this circles back to the idea that our identities, our careers, our lives, they aren't fixed statues. They're open systems, constantly capable of evolving and changing. We don't have to be imprisoned by old images of who we thought we should be or where we thought we were going.
So the simplest way to start rethinking our lives is maybe just questioning what we do every day, applying that scientific mindset to our own choices.
That's the heart of it. It takes humility to reconsider the paths we've chosen. It takes doubt to question our present decisions and comfort zones. And it takes curiosity to explore and imagine different future possibilities. But unlocking that cycle, humility, doubt, curiosity, it doesn't just liberate us to update our knowledge and opinions. It liberates us to lead richer, more meaningful, and ultimately more fulfilling lives.
What an incredible journey we've taken through this whole idea of rethinking. From that intense scene at Men Gulch, through the battles in our own minds, the challenges of opening others' minds, building learning cultures, and finally reimagining our own lives and even what happiness means.
It really touches every aspect of how we navigate the world.
It underscores that rethinking isn't a one-time fix, is it? It's a habit, a continuous, vital practice for living well in a world that just refuses to stand still.
A muscle we need to keep exercising.
Absolutely. And look, we can all get better at thinking again. Whatever conclusions you listening might have reached during this deep dive, I genuinely believe the world would be a slightly better place if everyone tried putting on those scientist goggles just a little more often, favoring curiosity over conviction.
Hear, hear.
So I guess the final thought is this. I'm curious. Do you agree with that? And if not, what evidence might change your mind?